After my wife's funeral, the pastor handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a brass key and coordinates to a bank I'd never heard of. My daughter laughed. "Just throw it out, Dad. Mom collected junk her whole life." That night, she tossed it in the trash. I dug it out at 3 in the morning. When the bank manager opened the vault and saw what was inside, she went white. "Sir, we need to contact the FBI immediately." That's when I learned my wife had been fighting a war I never knew existed. And I had a plan. Thanks for being here. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And be honest. If your own daughter betrayed everything your wife built in secret, would you have the strength to do what I did? Disclaimer. This narrative includes fictionalized elements. Names and settings have been changed, but the message behind it remains real. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the kind of love that protects even from the grave. Forgive me for the distance. Those were the last words my wife said to me. Not "I love you." Not "take care of yourself." Just an apology that made no sense. I stood beside Eleanor's casket in the First Baptist Church on Bull Street, Savannah, Georgia. And those 5 words echoed through me like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. 62 years old. That's all the time she got. 40 years married to me, and for the last 3 of them, she'd barely looked me in the eye. The church smelled like magnolias and old wood. Spanish moss hung outside the stained glass windows, filtering the March sunlight into something golden and heavy. Eleanor would have liked that. She always said Savannah dressed itself up for funerals better than any other city in the South. I stood at the front pew in my Navy dress uniform. 22 years I'd served, commanded a destroyer in the Persian Gulf, faced things that would keep most men awake for the rest of their lives. But standing there beside my wife's body, I felt smaller than I'd ever felt on any ocean. Dad. Rachel appeared at my elbow. My oldest. 38 years old, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Even her grief looked polished, like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "Are you okay?" I nodded. We both knew it was a lie. Across the chapel, Daniel stood by himself near the back wall. My son, 30 years old, wearing a simple dark jacket that didn't quite fit right across the shoulders. His hands were in his pockets. He looked like a man who wasn't sure if he belonged here. That was my fault. I'd made him feel that way for years. Pastor James Whitfield approached me after the last mourners filed past the casket. 70 years old, white hair, kind eyes that had seen too much sorrow in this church. He'd baptized both my children, married Eleanor and me right here in this same building. 40 years ago last June. Walter. His voice was low, private. Eleanor left something with me. She was very specific about when I should give it to you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick, sealed with red wax. My name written across the front in Eleanor's careful handwriting. The letters were shaky. She must have written it near the end, when the cancer had taken most of her strength but none of her mind. "She brought this to me 6 months ago," Pastor James said. "Told me to put it in the church safe. Said I should only give it to you after her funeral. Not before, not during, after." I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. "She also told me to tell you something." He leaned closer. She said, "Trust no one but yourself." She made me repeat it twice. A chill moved through me despite the warm Georgia air. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, Walter." But she was serious. More serious than I've ever seen her about anything. He placed his hand on my shoulder. "Whatever's in there, she wanted you to have it. Only you." He walked away, leaving me alone with the envelope and 40 years of questions I'd never thought to ask. I broke the wax seal carefully. Inside was tissue paper wrapped around something small and hard. I unwrapped it. A key. Brass, old-fashioned, about 2 inches long. It was heavy for its size, cold against my palm. The kind of key that belonged to another century. Beneath the tissue paper was a folded note. Eleanor's handwriting again, steadier this time. She must have written this part earlier, before the tremors got bad. Gregory Walter Brennan. Go to Savannah Heritage Trust Bank on Bull Street. Ask for Diana Mercer. No one else. Show her this key. Trust no one but yourself. I love you. Even when I seemed cold, I was trying to protect you. Forgive me, Eleanor. I read it 3 times. Each time, the words made less sense and more sense simultaneously. What's that? Rachel's voice came from behind me. Close. Too close. I hadn't heard her approach. I turned. She was looking at the key in my palm with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe. Or something sharper. Mom left it with Pastor James, I said. Rachel reached out and took the key before I could close my hand. She turned it over, examining it the way you'd examine a piece of costume jewelry at a yard sale. Dismissive. Almost amused. A key. She laughed. Not cruel exactly, but close enough to make my chest tighten. Dad. Mom was a librarian for 40 years. She made $38,000 a year. She clipped coupons until the day she couldn't hold scissors anymore. She handed the key back. This probably opens some old cabinet at the library. Or a jewelry box from the 1970s. She patted my arm. The same way you'd pat a confused dog. Just throw it out, Dad. Mom collected junk her whole life. Don't let some old key give you false hope about something that isn't there. Her eyes held mine for a moment. Something moved behind them. Something I didn't recognize. Then she smiled, squeezed my arm, and walked toward the door, where a tall man in a gray suit was waiting for her. I'd seen him outside earlier, good-looking in that too-polished way. He held the door open for her, and she glanced back at me once before stepping through. I looked down at the brass key in my palm. Cold. Heavy. Full of something I couldn't name yet. Eleanor had never collected junk in her life. 2 hours after the funeral, our house on Abercorn Street was full of people I barely recognized. Neighbors from down the block. Women from Eleanor's reading group at the library. A few men from my old Navy unit who'd driven up from Jacksonville. Everyone bringing food and sympathy like those 2 things could fill the hole Eleanor left behind. The house smelled like casseroles and lilies. Every surface in the kitchen was covered with aluminum foil pans and Tupperware containers labeled with masking tape. Brennan family written in different handwritings. Different versions of, "Sorry we couldn't do more." I stood by the kitchen window, holding a glass of sweet tea I hadn't touched, watching people move through my house like ghosts, touching Eleanor's things, sitting in her chair, saying her name like they had the right to. The brass key was in my jacket pocket. I could feel it there, pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat. "Dad, you need to eat something." Rachel appeared with a plate of food, arranged too neatly. Sliced ham, potato salad, a roll. She set it on the counter beside me. "You haven't had anything all day." "I'm not hungry." "At least drink your tea." She picked up a dish towel and started wiping down the counter. Efficient. Graceful. The perfect daughter, performing the perfect grief. People will be heading out soon. I'll stay and help clean up. I watched her move through the kitchen. She opened a drawer, reorganized silverware that didn't need reorganizing, wiped a spot on the stove that was already clean. Then her hand moved toward my jacket, draped over the back of a kitchen chair. "What are you doing?" "Just tidying up, Dad." She pulled the envelope from the jacket, slid out the key, held it up to the light, like she was appraising it. "You know, I was thinking about this. There's really no reason to hang on to it. It'll just upset you. A reminder of something that probably doesn't even exist anymore." She was already turning toward the trash can under the sink. "Rachel, give it back." She paused. The key dangled between her fingertips, hovering over the open trash can. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance. Maybe. Or calculation. Then it was gone. Replaced by that perfect, concerned daughter smile. Of course. Sorry, Dad. I was just trying to help. She placed the key back on the counter. Gently. Like it meant nothing to her at all. I just hate seeing you get your hopes up over nothing. I picked up the key and put it back in my jacket pocket. I need some air. I walked out to the back porch. The evening was warm, the way March evenings get in Savannah when spring decides it's done waiting. The live oak in the backyard was draped in Spanish moss that swayed like gray curtains in the breeze. Eleanor's garden was still there. Tomato cages she'd set up last fall, waiting for plants that would never come. I sat on the porch steps and breathed. Counted my breaths the way the Navy taught me. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Something was wrong with my daughter. Something beyond grief. Through the kitchen window, I could see inside. The warm yellow light framed the room like a television screen. Rachel was alone now. Everyone else had drifted into the living room, or left. She stood by the counter, looking around. Checking. Making sure. Then she moved to my jacket. I watched her hand go into the pocket. Watched her pull out the brass key. This time there was no hesitation. No performance. She opened the trash can with her foot, dropped the key in, and pressed it down under paper towels and coffee grounds. Closed the lid. Wiped her hands on her dress like she'd touched something dirty. My chest went cold. Not angry yet. Just cold. The way the ocean gets right before a storm rolls in. Rachel picked up her purse from the counter and walked out through the back door. She didn't see me. I was sitting in the shadows at the far end of the porch, behind the jasmine that Eleanor had trained up the railing 15 years ago. A car was idling in the driveway. Black sedan. Expensive. The same man from the church stepped out. Tall, gray suit. That too smooth confidence that reminded me of officers who'd never seen combat. The kind of man who smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. Rachel walked straight to him. He touched her arm. Familiar. Possessive. Is it handled? His voice was low, but the night was quiet. And sound carries in Savannah. Rachel nodded. It's in the garbage. He doesn't suspect anything. Good. And the bank? He doesn't even know which bank. She never told him anything. Rachel glanced back at the house, at my porch, at the shadows where I sat invisible. He's just a sad old man with a dead wife. He'll throw the rest of the junk away in a week and forget about it. The man opened the car door for her. Your mother was more careful than we expected. But it doesn't matter now. Without that key, there's nothing to find. Rachel got in. The door closed. The car pulled away into the darkness under the oak trees. Taillights, disappearing down Abercorn Street, like two red eyes closing. I didn't move. Couldn't move. 22 years in the Navy. I'd been trained for ambushes, for betrayal from enemies. But nothing trains you for hearing your own daughter call you a sad old man. Nothing prepares you for watching your child conspire over your wife's grave. The back door opened. Footsteps. Soft. Hesitant. Dad? Daniel. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the kitchen light. His face was in shadow, but I could see his hands were shaking. I saw her, he said quietly. I was in the hallway. I saw Rachel take the key and throw it away. He paused, swallowed. I wanted to stop her. I should have stopped her. But it's okay, son. It's not okay. His voice cracked. Something's wrong, Dad. Something's been wrong for a long time. With Rachel. With that man she's always with. I've been wanting to tell you, but every time I try. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Every time he'd tried to warn me about Rachel, I'd shut him down, called him jealous, told him to be more like his sister. For years I'd done that. I know, I said. I know something's wrong. Daniel looked at me. In the half-light, he looked so much like Eleanor it hurt. What are you going to do? He asked. I stared out at the dark street where Rachel's car had disappeared. The house was quiet now. Everyone was gone. Just me and my son and the ghost of my wife and a brass key buried in the trash under coffee grounds and paper towels. I'm going to find out what your mother was protecting, I said. Daniel nodded once. Then he went back inside. And I sat alone on the porch, listening to the crickets and the night and the slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my family. The silence after a 40-year marriage ends is the loudest thing you'll ever hear. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to it. No sound of Eleanor moving around in the bathroom. No soft rustling of pages from her reading in bed. No gentle breathing beside me in the dark. Just nothing. A nothing so loud it pressed against my eardrums like deep water pressure. The clock on the nightstand ticked. Each second felt like a small hammer striking the same nail deeper into my chest. 11:30. Midnight. 12:45. I turned onto my side. Eleanor's pillow was still there. Still held the slight impression of her head from the last time she'd slept in this bed. 3 weeks before the hospital took her for good. I hadn't washed the pillowcase. Couldn't. It still smelled like her. Lavender and something else. Something that was just Eleanor and couldn't be named or bottled or kept. 3 years. For 3 years. She'd been pulling away from me. 3 years of short answers and avoided eyes and sleeping on the far edge of the bed like the 6 inches between us was an ocean she couldn't cross. I'd thought it was the cancer at first. Then I thought it was me. Something I'd done wrong. Something I'd failed to do. I'd asked her once, 2 years ago, sitting at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening, "Eleanor, are we okay?" She'd looked at me with eyes full of something I couldn't read and said, "We're fine, Walter." Then she'd gone back to washing dishes that were already clean. We weren't fine. I knew we weren't fine. But I didn't push. Didn't ask the hard questions. Because I was afraid the answer might be that she'd stopped loving me, and I couldn't survive that. Now I knew there was something else. Something she'd been carrying alone. "Forgive me for the distance." Her last words. They made sense now. Not the full picture, not yet. But the edges were forming. The distance wasn't rejection. It was protection. From what? I didn't know. But Rachel's behavior today had cracked something open. The way she'd dismissed the key. The way she'd thrown it away when she thought I wasn't watching. The man in the driveway. Without that key. There's nothing to find. I sat up. The bedroom was dark except for the glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. 2:17 in the morning. My body ached the way it always did now. Joints stiff from 6 decades and 22 years of Navy wear. But my mind was sharp. Alert. The way it used to get before an operation at sea. That feeling of knowing something is coming and needing to be ready. I pulled on my robe and walked downstairs. The kitchen was dark except for the small light over the stove that Eleanor always left on. She said it made the house feel less empty when you came downstairs at night. I'd never turned it off. Probably never would. I stood there for a moment, looking at the trash can under the sink. 64 years old. Retired naval officer, standing in my kitchen at 2:30 in the morning, about to dig through garbage because my dead wife had asked me to trust no one, and my living daughter had tried to destroy the only thing Eleanor left behind. I opened the cabinet, pulled out the trash bag. It wasn't full. We'd changed it that morning before people started arriving for the reception. I set it on the floor, untied it, and started pulling things out. Paper plates. Napkins stained with sweet tea. An empty casserole dish someone had forgotten to take home. Coffee grounds wrapped in a paper towel. A crumpled paper cup. Then I felt it. Cold. Smooth. Heavier than its size suggested. I pulled the brass key out carefully, like it might disappear if I moved too fast. Coffee grounds clung to it. A wet smear from something I didn't want to identify. I held it under the faucet. Let warm water run over it. Then dried it with a clean dish towel. The metal caught the dim stove light and held it. Old brass. Worn at the edges from age, but solid. The teeth were simple, not the complex cuts of a modern key. This was made for something old, something built to last. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled Eleanor's note from my robe pocket. I'd kept it on me since the church, transferred it from jacket to robe before bed. Couldn't let it go. I unfolded it now under the warm yellow glow of the stove light and read it again. Gregory Walter Brennan. Go to Savannah Heritage Trust Bank on Bull Street. Ask for Diana Mercer. No one else. Show her this key. Trust no one but yourself. I love you. Even when I seemed cold, I was trying to protect you. Forgive me, Eleanor. Even when I seemed cold, I was trying to protect you. 3 years of distance. 3 years of thinking my wife had fallen out of love with me. 3 years of sleeping beside a woman who wouldn't meet my eyes and wondering what I'd done wrong. And the whole time, she was protecting me. From what? From whom? I looked at the key again. Turned it over in my palm. Savannah Heritage Trust Bank. I knew the building. Old stone facade on Bull Street. Between the courthouse and the antique shop Eleanor used to browse on Saturday mornings. I'd walked past it 1,000 times. Never went inside. Never had reason to. Diana Mercer. The name meant nothing to me. Eleanor had never mentioned her. Not once in 40 years of marriage. Which meant this was something Eleanor had kept entirely separate from our life together. A secret world I'd never been invited into. Trust no one but yourself. I thought about Rachel. Her hand hovering over the trash can. Just throw it out, Dad. Her voice outside with the man. He doesn't suspect anything. The casual cruelty of it. The practiced ease. Like she'd been lying to me for so long it didn't even register as lying anymore. I thought about Daniel on the porch. His shaking hands. Something's been wrong for a long time, Dad. How many times had he tried to tell me? How many times had I shut him down because Rachel's smile was brighter and her words were smoother and it was easier to believe the daughter who told me what I wanted to hear. The clock on the microwave read 3:14. The bank opened at 9. 5 hours and 46 minutes. I made coffee. Poured it into Eleanor's favorite mug. The blue one with the chipped handle she'd refused to throw away. I didn't drink it. Just held it. Let the warmth seep into my hands and thought about my wife. 40 years. She'd given me 40 years. And somewhere in those 40 years, she'd built something I never knew about. Something important enough to hide. Something dangerous enough that our own daughter wanted it destroyed. I set the mug down. Picked up the key. Held it tight in my fist until the teeth pressed small indentations into my palm. The sky outside the kitchen window was still black. No stars. Just the orange glow of the streetlight on Abercorn Street and the dark shapes of live oaks standing like sentinels in the yard. Eleanor's garden was out there somewhere in the darkness. Waiting for spring. Waiting for hands that would never come. I'm going to find out, I whispered to the empty kitchen. To Eleanor. To whatever piece of her was still here in this house. In these walls. In the lavender smell on her pillow upstairs. Whatever you were protecting. Whatever you were fighting. I'm going to finish it. The house stayed silent. But the key in my hand felt warm now. Like an answer. Like a promise. 5 hours until the bank opened. 5 hours until I walked into whatever Eleanor had been hiding for 35 years. I sat at that kitchen table and waited for dawn. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel alone. Savannah Heritage Trust Bank sat on Bull Street between the old county courthouse and an antique shop Eleanor used to love. I'd walked past it 1,000 times in 40 years. Never once went inside. It was one of those old Savannah buildings that looked like it had grown out of the ground rather than been built on top of it. Stone facade, tall windows, iron railings, turned green with age. I was standing outside the glass doors at 8:15. 45 minutes early. The March morning was cool, the kind that would burn off by noon. I'd put on a clean shirt, shaved for the first time since Eleanor went into the hospital. The brass key sat in my breast pocket where I could feel it against my heart. 22 years in the Navy. I'd commanded a destroyer through a hurricane in the Philippine Sea. But standing on that sidewalk waiting for a bank to open, I was more nervous than I'd ever been on any bridge. At 9 sharp, a young woman unlocked the doors. I was the first person through. The lobby was cool, quiet, marble floors reflecting high windows. A teller looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning. How can I help you? I need to see Diana Mercer." No one else. I pulled the brass key from my pocket and set it on the counter. "My wife left me this. She said to come here. Show this key to Diana Mercer." The teller looked at the key, then at me. Something changed in her face. Not surprise. Confirmation. Like she'd been told this moment would come. "One moment, please." She disappeared. 31 seconds later, a woman stepped through the door. Mid-50s, silver hair in a clean bun, wire-rimmed glasses, navy blazer. She walked straight to me. "Mr. Brennan." Her handshake was firm, certain. "I'm Diana Mercer, branch director." She looked me in the eyes. "I've been expecting you. Please follow me." She led me through the lobby, past a heavy oak door, down a corridor that smelled like old paper. We stopped at a reinforced steel door. She entered a code. The lock clicked. "I'm sorry for your loss," Diana said as we descended a short staircase. Eleanor was remarkable. I've known her for 35 years. 35 years. And I never heard your name once. Something sad crossed her face. That was intentional. Eleanor kept this part of her life separate. She said it was the only way to keep it safe. The vault room was cool, fluorescent lit, rows of metal boxes from floor to ceiling. Diana led me to a table in the center. She took the key, carried it to box 744, turned it, and pulled out a long metal drawer. She set it in front of me. "This is everything Eleanor left for you." I lifted the lid. Inside, stacked neatly, documents, folders, 7 leather-bound journals, labeled 2019 through 2025, a USB drive in a plastic case, and a sealed envelope with my name. "Before you open those," Diana said, sitting across from me, "I need to explain something. Your wife came to me in 1989 with $2,000 saved from her library salary. She wanted to invest in real estate. 1989. Rachel was 3. Daniel wasn't born yet. We were eating rice and beans 3 nights a week on a junior officer's salary. Over 35 years, Eleanor purchased properties in the historic district. Always small, always quiet. Save for months, buy, fix up, rent out, reinvest." She turned a monitor toward me. "Current portfolio, 12 residential properties. Total assessed value, as of January." I looked at the number, $5,847,000. The room tilted. I gripped the table. "That can't be right." "I assure you it's correct. Your wife was one of the most disciplined investors I've ever known. 35 years of quiet, consistent building. My wife. The woman who clipped coupons. Who drove the same Honda Civic for 14 years. Who bought clothes at thrift stores. That woman had built a $6 million portfolio without telling anyone. Why didn't she tell me?" Diana's expression shifted. She opened a folder. Inside were black and white security photographs, time-stamped. "Because of this. 3 years ago, someone began attempting to transfer ownership of these properties using forged documents and signatures." She spread 3 photographs across the table. Different dates, different outfits, same face. "Rachel, my daughter at this bank." Smiling at a teller. Holding documents that would steal everything Eleanor spent 35 years building. 3 times, Diana said. 2019, 2021, 2022. Each time our system flagged the signatures. Each time I called Eleanor, and she didn't press charges. No. Every time she said, "I'll handle it myself. Don't tell Walter." Not yet. I stared at Rachel's face in those photographs. Confident. Smiling. The golden child. And behind that smile, a thief. Diana stood. There's more. She pointed to the journals and USB drive. Your wife spent 7 years documenting everything. Every attempt, every lie, every person involved. She built a case, Mr. Brennan. A pause. Against her own daughter. The words hung in the vault like smoke. I'll give you privacy. Take as long as you need. She moved toward the door. There are also recordings on that USB drive. Phone calls Eleanor recorded over 2 years. I haven't listened to them. That's for you. The door closed. The vault room went silent. Just me and 7 years of my wife's secrets spread across a metal table. I looked at the first journal. 2019. Eleanor's small, precise handwriting on the cover. I opened it to the first page. The first entry was dated March 14th, 2019. Today I discovered my daughter has been forging my signature. I found a transfer of ownership form in the recycling bin at the bank. My name. My properties. But not my handwriting. Not even close. I cannot tell Walter yet. He would never believe his golden child is a thief. So I'm writing everything down. Every detail. Every date. Every lie. Until the evidence speaks louder than Rachel's smile. I read it twice. 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. She'd known for 7 years. 7 years of watching Rachel try to steal from her, and she'd carried it alone because she knew I wouldn't believe her. She was right. I wouldn't have. A soft knock on the vault door. Diana stepped back in carrying a laptop and a manila folder. I thought you might need context for what you're reading, she said. Setting both on the table. She opened the folder. More photographs. More timestamps. More evidence. Let me walk you through the 3 attempts in detail. She laid the photos in chronological order. March 2019. Rachel came in with a notarized transfer document. It looked professional. Good paper, proper formatting. But the signature didn't match our records. Our verification system flagged it immediately. She pointed to the first photo. Rachel at the counter. Black coat. Hair pulled back. Smiling at the teller like she owned the place. She wanted to transfer 2 properties on East Jones Street into her name. Said Eleanor had given them to her as a gift. When our teller asked for additional verification, Rachel became agitated. Said her mother was ill and couldn't come in person. We called Eleanor directly. What did Eleanor say? She said the transfer was unauthorized. That Rachel did not have permission. And then she asked me not to file a police report. Diana paused. She said she needed more time. More evidence. I looked at the second photo. June 2021. Rachel again. Different outfit, same confidence. Same smile. That could convince you the sky was green if she wanted it to be. This time she had a power of attorney document. Very convincing. A lawyer's letterhead. Witnesses. The whole package. But the witnesses didn't exist. The lawyer's office was a vacant suite in a strip mall on Abercorn. Diana shook her head. She'd gotten better at it. More sophisticated. Someone was helping her. Someone. The man in the gray suit. The man in the driveway. The third attempt. October 2022. Diana pointed to the last photo. This was the most aggressive. Rachel didn't come alone. A man accompanied her, well-dressed, confident. He presented himself as Eleanor's financial advisor and said Eleanor wanted to restructure her holdings. My chest tightened. What did he look like? Tall. Dark hair. Gray suit. Very polished. The kind of man who makes you feel like everything he says must be true. Diana looked at me. Do you know him? The driveway. The funeral. Is it handled? It's in the garbage. I've seen him, I said. I don't know his name. Diana nodded slowly. Eleanor knew him. She wrote about him extensively in her journals. She believed he was the one directing Rachel, that your daughter wasn't acting alone. She closed the photo folder and opened the laptop. 3 years ago, after the third attempt, Eleanor came to me and made several changes. First, she added you as co-owner to the trust that holds all 12 properties. She said if anything happened to her, you needed immediate access. No probate, no delays, no way for anyone to contest it. She was preparing. Yes. She also instructed me to preserve all evidence of the unauthorized attempts. Every document Rachel submitted. Every security photograph. Every record of every phone call. Diana turned the laptop toward me. And she left this. On the screen was a folder directory. Audio files. Dozens of them. Dated from January 2023 through February 2025. The last one was dated 11 days before Eleanor died. Recordings, Diana said. Eleanor recorded phone conversations over the past 2 years. She said they would explain everything. She was very clear that only you should hear them. Diana stood. I'll leave you again. The laptop has speakers. Take your time. She placed her hand on my shoulder briefly. Your wife was one of the bravest people I've ever known, Mr. Brennan. What she did. Alone. For 7 years. I hope you understand that when you hear what's on those files. She left. The vault door closed with a heavy click. I stared at the screen. Dozens of recordings. 2 years of Eleanor's secret war. Captured in audio files I could play with a single click. I started with the most recent. February 13th, 2025. 11 days before she died. The speakers crackled. Then Eleanor's voice. Weak. Tired. But sharp. Still sharp. Rachel. Hi, honey. Mom. How are you feeling? The same. Listen, Rachel. I wanted to ask you about something. Sure, Mom. Anything. The properties on East Jones Street. Have you been in contact with anyone at the bank about them? Silence. 2 seconds. 3. What properties, Mom? I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. I just wanted to check. The bank called me about some paperwork confusion. That's weird. Probably just a clerical error. You know how banks are. Rachel's laugh. Light. Easy. Perfect. Don't worry about it. Focus on resting. You're right. I'm sure it's nothing. The call ended. I sat there, chest tight, fists clenched on the table. My daughter, lying to her dying mother's face, without a flicker of hesitation. I clicked another file. January 8th, 2025. This one wasn't Eleanor's voice at all. It was Rachel, talking to someone else. A man. The recording was slightly muffled, like Eleanor had captured it from a distance. Or from another phone. Rachel's voice. She's getting worse. A few more weeks. Maybe a month. The doctor said the cancer's in her spine now. The man. Good. Once she's gone, we move on the properties. The old man won't fight it. He doesn't even know they exist. Rachel. What about the key? She keeps talking about some key she has at the bank. That's why you need to get close to her. Find out where it is. When she dies, you grab it before anyone else knows. Without that key, no one can access the vault. Rachel. And if Dad finds it first, then you take it from him. Throw it away. Destroy it. Whatever it takes. Without the key, there's nothing to find. The recording ended. The vault room was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights above me. I sat there with my hands flat on the cold metal table, breathing like I'd just surfaced from deep water. My daughter had been planning to rob her dying mother. And the man in the gray suit had been directing the entire operation. Waiting for Eleanor to die, so they could take everything she'd built. And Eleanor had known. Had recorded it. Had prepared for this exact moment. The moment I would sit in this vault and finally hear the truth she couldn't tell me while she was alive. I closed the laptop, picked up the first journal again. There were 7 of them. 7 years of evidence. 7 years of my wife fighting a war, alone, in the dark. I had a lot more reading to do. I spent the next 4 hours in that vault room. 4 hours reading my wife's handwriting. 4 hours watching her fight a war I never knew existed. Every page was a knife. Every entry was proof of how blind I'd been. The journals were meticulous. Eleanor had been a librarian for 40 years, and she documented her investigation the way she'd catalog books, dates, sources, cross-references, evidence filed in order. Each entry building on the last like chapters in a story that only got darker the further you read. The second journal, 2020, was where everything changed. Where it stopped being about Rachel stealing from her mother and became something much worse. September 12, 2020. Harold Sims came to the house today. He was crying. Harold Sims, 82 years old. Purple Heart. 2 tours in Vietnam. 20 years in the army before that. The strongest man I know besides Walter, and he sat at my kitchen table and cried like a child. I knew Harold. We'd served different branches, but he was a veteran. Part of our community. He'd come to our 4th of July barbecue every year, until Eleanor got sick. Harold told me he lost everything. $40,000. His entire retirement savings. He said a woman from a wellness center downtown approached him about an investment opportunity, showed him brochures, testimonials, projected returns. He trusted her because she was young and professional and reminded him of his granddaughter. My hands went cold. He said the wellness center was called Magnolia, on Drayton Street in Midtown. I felt something break inside me when he said that name. Magnolia Wellness and Spa. My daughter's business. Eleanor had connected it. Right there in her kitchen, listening to an old soldier cry, she'd realized her daughter's spa was being used to steal from veterans. The entries after that became more frequent, more detailed. Eleanor had started investigating. October 3, 2020. I drove past Magnolia today. Sat in the parking lot for an hour. Watched who came in and out. The man Rachel brought to the bank in 22 was there. Tall, gray suit. He arrived at 9 and didn't leave until 6. He's not a customer. He's running something from inside that building. November 15, 2020. I called the Georgia Secretary of State's office and requested business filings for Magnolia Wellness LLC. The spa is registered to Rachel, but there's a second name on the operating agreement. Julian Cross. 40% ownership. I've never heard Rachel mention this name. Not once. Julian Cross. Now I had a name for the man in the driveway. January 8, 2021. I found 2 more veterans. Frank Delgado, 79, lost $35,000. James Okafor, 77, lost $28,000. Both approached by a young woman at Magnolia. Both given the same pitch. Real estate development. Guaranteed returns. Both lost everything. Eleanor had tracked them down. Gone to their homes. Sat with them. Listened. Documented. March 2021. I now have confirmation of 8 veterans who lost money through schemes connected to Magnolia Spa. Total confirmed losses. $2.1 million. Julian Cross is the architect. Rachel is his tool. She identifies the targets through community events, church gatherings, VA functions. She's charming, trustworthy. The daughter everyone wishes they had, and she uses that trust to lead them to Julian. 8 veterans. $2.1 million. My daughter had been helping a predator steal retirement money from men who served this country. Men like me. Men like the sailors I'd commanded for 22 years. I set the journal down. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold it steady. I pressed my palms flat on the cold metal table and breathed. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Then I picked up journal number 4. 2022. The year Eleanor had written about the lies. April 17, 2022. Rachel told Walter, "I said I feel suffocated by his schedule. I never said that. I never even thought it. She's creating distance between us, isolating us from each other, so we can't compare notes. So Walter won't ask me why I've been quiet. It's working. He barely looks at me anymore. He thinks I don't love him." July 9, 2022. Walter tried to hold my hand at dinner tonight. I pulled away. It killed me. But if I let him get close, if he sees my face when he touches me, he'll know something is wrong. He'll ask questions, and I'll break. I'll tell him everything before I have enough proof, and he won't believe me. He'll ask Rachel, and Rachel will cry, and he'll choose her. He always chooses her. So I stay cold, and every night I lie awake hating myself for it. I couldn't read anymore. Not that entry. I closed the journal and pressed my fingers against my eyes until I saw white. 3 years. 3 years of manufactured distance. Eleanor pulling away from me, not because she'd stopped loving me, but because she loved me too much to risk breaking before she was ready. And Rachel had engineered all of it. Fed us lies like slow poison until the space between us felt permanent. I opened the last journal. 2025. Only a few entries. Eleanor's handwriting was shaky now, the cancer taking her hands before it took the rest. The final entry. February 10th. 2 weeks before she died. I know I'm running out of time. The cancer won't wait for justice. But I've given Walter everything he needs. The journals, the recordings, the photographs. Diana has it all. The key will lead him there. I just have to trust that he'll find it. That Rachel won't get to it first. That my husband, my Walter, will be brave enough to see what I've been protecting him from. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you, my love. I'm sorry for the cold. I'm sorry for the distance. But I hope you understand now. Everything I did because I love you, and because someone has to stop them before they destroy another family. I closed the journal, set it down carefully on the table. Then I put my head in my hands and wept. Not for losing Eleanor. I'd already mourned that. This was something different. This was mourning the 3 years I'd wasted, believing she didn't love me. 3 years of sleeping beside her thinking I'd done something wrong. 3 years of silence that was never silence at all. It was sacrifice. She'd loved me the entire time. Every cold shoulder, every avoided glance, every night on the far edge of the bed. Love. All of it. The most painful, selfless love I'd ever known. And now she was gone. And the war she'd been fighting alone for 7 years was mine to finish. I wiped my face, stacked the journals neatly, put the USB drive in my pocket, stood up from that metal table in that cold vault room, and felt something settle inside me. Not grief, not anger, something harder than both. Purpose. 3 years ago, I thought my wife stopped loving me. I was wrong. She was carrying a weight I couldn't imagine, and our daughter put it there. I drove home from the bank that afternoon with the journals on the passenger seat and Eleanor's recordings in my pocket. The live oaks along Bull Street blurred past the windows, their moss hanging like gray curtains. I couldn't stop thinking about the entries in Journal 4. The ones about me, about us, about the lies Rachel had planted between us like landmines, buried just beneath the surface of ordinary conversation. I remembered the first time. Summer, 2021. Rachel had stopped by the house on a Sunday afternoon, found me in the garage, reorganizing my tools the way I always did when I needed to think. Eleanor had been distant for months by then, quiet, pulling away from me, in ways I couldn't name. "Dad, are you okay?" Rachel leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. Concerned daughter. Loving daughter. I'm fine. Just thinking, is it Mom? Her voice dropped. Gentle. Careful. She seems different lately. Is everything okay between you two? I'd looked up from the socket wrench in my hand. I don't know. She won't talk to me. Rachel nodded slowly. Bit her lip like she was wrestling with something she didn't want to say. She said something to me last week. About you. My chest had tightened. What did she say? I don't know if I should tell you. I don't want to make things worse. Rachel. Please. She'd hesitated. A perfect hesitation. Rehearsed, I now realized. But at the time, it looked like genuine reluctance. She said she feels like you don't make time for her anymore. That you're always in the garage or at the VA or out with your Navy friends. She said she feels invisible. Eleanor said that. My Eleanor. Who never once in 40 years complained about my hobbies or my friends. Who encouraged me to go to every reunion, every event. Who said being together didn't mean being attached at the hip. She said that? I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have told you. Forget I said anything, but I didn't forget. I came home early the next 3 weeks. Suggested dinner out. A weekend trip to Tybee Island. Every time, Eleanor said no. She was tired. She had work. She wasn't feeling well. I thought she was rejecting me, confirming what Rachel had told me. Eventually, I stopped trying. What I didn't know was that Eleanor had never said any of it. And Rachel had gone to Eleanor the same week with a different poison. Journal 4. Entry dated August 2021. Rachel told me Walter said he's tired of coming home to a quiet house, that he feels suffocated, that he needs more space. I know this isn't true. I know my husband. He's never said those words in 40 years. But hearing them from Rachel's mouth, with that concerned look on her face, it plants a seed. And seeds grow in silence. 2 years. For 2 years, Rachel stood between us. Told me Eleanor was unhappy with me. Told Eleanor I was unhappy with her. Created a no man's land of hurt feelings and confused silence that neither of us knew how to cross. Because every time we might have talked, might have asked each other the truth, Rachel's lies were already there. Poisoning the well before we could drink. And I fell for it. Every single time. Then there was the dinner. Thanksgiving, 2022. The whole family together. Rachel, Daniel, Eleanor, and me. Rare even then. Rachel was always busy. Daniel was always quiet. Eleanor barely spoke anymore. Halfway through the meal, Daniel set down his fork. Dad, I need to tell you something. Rachel's head snapped up. I remembered that now. The sharpness in her eyes. The alertness of a predator who senses a threat. What is it, son? Daniel hesitated. Glanced at Rachel. Then at Eleanor, who was watching him with an expression I couldn't read at the time but now recognized as hope. Hope that someone would finally say what she couldn't. Rachel borrowed money from me. $60,000. 14 months ago. She said she'd pay it back in 6 months. She hasn't. The table went silent. Daniel. Rachel's voice was soft. Wounded. I told you I'm working on it. Things have been difficult with the spa expansion. I know. But I'm behind on my boat payments. I can't make rent some months. You're bringing this up at Thanksgiving? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Perfect tears. In front of Mom and Dad? You know I've been struggling with the business. I didn't mean to. She stood. Dabbed her eyes with her napkin. I'm sorry. I'll figure it out. She was already grabbing her purse. Already performing the exit. The wounded sister driven away by the ungrateful brother. I followed her to the driveway. Sweetheart, it's okay. I don't want to be a burden, Dad. She wiped her eyes. Daniel's right. I should have paid him back by now. How much do you need? She'd hesitated. Another perfect hesitation. If I could borrow 50,000, just until the new contracts come through, I'll pay Daniel back first. I wrote her a check. Right there in the driveway. $50,000. Because my golden child was crying, and I wanted to fix it. I always wanted to fix it. Then I went back inside. Daniel was clearing the table. His face was red. Eleanor stood at the sink, her back to me. That wasn't fair to Rachel, I said to Daniel. Ambushing her like that at a family dinner. Daniel's hands froze on a plate. Ambushing her? If you had a problem, you should have called her privately, not embarrassed her in front of everyone. I did call her. 15 times. She never answers. She's dealing with a lot, Daniel. Try to be more understanding. Try not to be so. I searched for the word. Found the wrong one. Jealous. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Daniel set the plate down carefully. Picked up his jacket. I should go. Daniel. But he was already out the door. And Eleanor never turned around from the sink. Never said a word. Because what could she say? She knew the truth. She knew Rachel had just stolen $50,000 from me with tears and a performance. And she knew that if she said anything, I'd do exactly what I'd just done to Daniel. Choose Rachel. Dismiss the truth. Call it jealousy. I pulled into my driveway on Abercorn Street and turned off the engine. Sat there in the silence with the journals beside me and the weight of everything I'd just remembered pressing down on my chest. I'd failed them. Eleanor. Daniel. Both of them. For years I'd handed Rachel money, handed her trust, handed her my blindness like a gift she could spend however she wanted. And every time Daniel tried to warn me, every time Eleanor might have spoken up, I'd made it clear whose side I was on. The wrong side. Every single time. $200,000. That's what I calculated sitting in that car. Over 5 years, I'd given Rachel $200,000 in loans she never repaid. Money for the spa, money for expansion, money for bridge financing and emergency repairs, and a dozen other lies I'd swallowed because they came wrapped in tears and that smile. $200,000 of my retirement. Fed directly into whatever Julian Cross was running through that spa. I looked at the house. Eleanor's garden. Eleanor's porch. Eleanor's life. Still standing here even though she was gone. And I thought about what she'd written in that final entry. I hope you understand now. Everything I did because I love you. I understood. Too late. But I understood. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. I hadn't slept. Hadn't even tried. I'd spent the night at the kitchen table with Eleanor's journals, cross-referencing dates with my own memories, trying to match the woman I thought I knew with the woman who'd been waging a secret war under the same roof. Daniel's name on the screen. In 30 years, my son had never called me before sunrise. Dad, I need to talk to you. Not on the phone. Forsyth Park. The bench by the fountain. 30 minutes. The morning was gray and cool. Fog hung in the streets the way it does in Savannah in early March. I walked through the iron gates and found Daniel already there, sitting under a live oak, arms on his knees, staring at the ground. His eyes were red. I sat beside him. The fountain splashed in the quiet. I went to the bank yesterday, I said. I found everything Mom left. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. I didn't know what she left, but I knew she was keeping records. He swallowed. She told me. 2 years ago. Made me promise not to tell you. She said if you confronted Rachel, Rachel would run, and they'd never be caught. Eleanor had recruited Daniel. Trusted him with part of the truth. My son had been carrying this for 2 years. Watching me hand money to Rachel. Watching me dismiss his concerns. Knowing and unable to speak. I'm sorry, Daniel. For Thanksgiving. For calling you jealous. For every time I chose her over you. His jaw tightened. Dad, don't. Not yet. I need to tell you something first. He pulled out a folder. Worn, thick with papers. 3 years ago, Rachel called me. Said she wanted lunch. Just us. A bitter smile. She brought someone. Julian. Charming. Confident. He told me about a resort development in Street, Simon's Island. Projections, testimonials, renderings. Everything looked real. How much? 60,000. Flat. Like a number he'd stared at so long it lost meaning. I took out a loan. First Coastal Credit Union. 14%. For 6 months Julian sent updates. Then nothing. Rachel said he'd left for a business emergency. Said she'd lost money too. And the payments? $2,200 a month. I'm a boat mechanic, Dad. I clear $3,800 after taxes. His voice tightened. I sold my tools. My fishing boat. Worked double shifts. Ate ramen for a year. He paused. I missed Mom's last 2 weeks in the hospital because I was working 70 hours trying to make a payment on money that was stolen from me. I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched, then didn't pull away. 8 months ago, the credit union called. Loan paid in full. Anonymous. He looked at me. It was Mom. She paid it off without telling anyone. Eleanor. Saving Daniel quietly. Without credit. Without anyone knowing until she was gone. After that, I started digging. Daniel pulled papers from the folder. Printouts. Mugshots. Court records. Julian Cross. Real name Julian Andrew Crossfield. 42. Arrested in Jacksonville, Florida. 2014. Elder fraud. Wire fraud. Exploitation of vulnerable adults. 18 months. Released. 2016. He flipped to the next page. Arrested again in Austin, Texas. 2018. Same charges. Targeted military families through a fake veterans charity. 2 years. Released December 2019. He looked at me. 1 month later, he was in Savannah. 1 month. Julian Crossfield walked out of a Texas prison and straight into my daughter's life. There's more. Daniel spread papers across the bench. I've confirmed 8 veterans in the Savannah area who lost money through schemes connected to Magnolia Spa. Over 2 million total. Harold Sims lost 40,000. Frank Delgado, 35. James Okafor, 28. Robert Whitmore, 45. 4 others, with smaller amounts. Harold Sims, I said quietly, 82 years old. Purple Heart, 2 tours in Vietnam. He's living in the VA shelter on Eisenhower Drive now. Lost everything. The man who'd come to Eleanor's kitchen and cried. Living in a shelter because my daughter and Julian Cross stole his retirement. We're going to the FBI, I said. Today. Daniel looked at me. Not surprise. Relief. Like he'd been waiting 3 years to hear those words. Today, he said. I turned to face him fully. Daniel, I need to say something. I was wrong. About everything. For years you tried to tell me, and I wouldn't listen. Your mother carried this alone, because I made it impossible for anyone to speak the truth in our family, and you suffered for it. My throat tightened. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you needed. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he put his hand over mine on the bench. You're here now, he said. That's what matters. We sat there another minute. The fog was lifting. Somewhere in this city, Julian Cross was still free. Rachel was still lying. 8 veterans were still waiting for justice. Not for much longer. I'd spent 22 years in the United States Navy. I'd followed orders, led men, made decisions that cost lives and saved them. But walking into the FBI field office on Abercorn Street that afternoon, with my dead wife's journals under my arm, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Because it meant admitting what those journals proved. That my daughter was a criminal. That my wife had known. And that I'd been too blind to see either truth. The building was nondescript. Beige stucco, tinted windows, a small sign by the door that most people walked past without noticing. Daniel parked the truck, and we sat for a moment, engine off, staring at the entrance. "You ready?" he asked. "No. Let's go." The receptionist took our names and the word elder financial fraud and made a phone call. 10 minutes later, a man appeared through a security door. Mid-40s, close-cropped hair, dark suit, the build of someone who still ran 5 miles every morning. His eyes were sharp, assessing us both in the time it took to cross the lobby. "Mr. Brennan?" He extended his hand. Firm grip. Direct eye contact. Agent Marcus Cole, Financial Crimes Division. He looked at Daniel. "And you are?" "Daniel Brennan." "My son. Come with me." He led us through a corridor of closed doors and fluorescent lights into a small conference room. Gray walls, a table, 4 chairs, a laptop already open. He gestured for us to sit. The receptionist mentioned elder fraud. "Tell me what's going on." I set the first journal on the table, then the second, then all 7. The USB drive, the folder of security photographs from the bank, Daniel's folder of court records and mugshots, Eleanor's letter. Everything spread across that government table like the contents of a war chest. "My wife passed away 3 weeks ago," I said. "She left me evidence of a 7-year fraud operation targeting elderly veterans in the Savannah area, run by a man named Julian Cross through my daughter's business, Magnolia Wellness and Spa." Cole's expression didn't change, but something sharpened behind his eyes. He picked up the first journal, opened it, read the first entry silently, turned the page, read another. Then he set it down and looked at me. "Julian Cross. Real name. Julian Andrew Crossfield," Daniel said. He slid the mugshots across the table. 2 prior convictions. Jacksonville 2014. Austin 2018. Both for elder fraud targeting military families. Cole took the mugshots, studied them, then turned to his laptop and typed for 30 seconds. His jaw tightened. "Julian Crossfield." He looked up. "He's been on our watch list for 3 years. Interstate fraud. Suspected money laundering. We knew he was operating somewhere in the southeast but couldn't pin his location." He looked at the journals. "You're telling me your wife found him?" "She did more than find him." I pushed the USB drive across the table. "She recorded phone conversations between my daughter and Julian over 2 years. She documented 8 veteran victims with names, amounts, and dates. She preserved security camera footage of my daughter attempting to forge documents at her bank 3 separate times." Cole inserted the USB drive into his laptop. Clicked the first file. Rachel's voice filled the room. "She's getting worse. A few more weeks. Once she's gone, we move on the properties." He paused the recording. Looked at me. Then at the journals. Then at Daniel's court records. "Mr. Brennan." His voice was different now. Careful. Respectful. "Your wife did in 7 years what this office couldn't do in 3. This is a prosecutable case. Not just locally. Federally." "How bad is it?" I asked. "Beyond Savannah?" Cole typed again. Scrolled through something on his screen. "Julian Crossfield has been connected to fraud operations in 4 states. Florida, Texas, Georgia, and we suspected North Carolina. Total estimated damages across all jurisdictions exceed $4.2 million. He paused. "His pattern is consistent. He targets military communities, finds a woman with connections, usually in caregiving or wellness, uses her business as a front for money laundering while she identifies vulnerable targets. 3 other women," Daniel said. "In Florida and Texas, 2 went to prison. 1 pled out." Cole looked at Daniel. "Your sister fits the profile exactly." The room was quiet for a moment. Just the hum of the air conditioning and the weight of what was about to happen. "What now?" I asked. Cole closed the laptop, folded his hands on the table. "I'm opening a formal federal investigation. Based on what you've brought me today, I have enough for arrest warrants. For Julian, for both of them." He looked me in the eye. Your daughter, Rachel and Julian Crossfield. I'll coordinate with local PD for simultaneous operations. We take them both at the same time, so neither can warn the other. I'd known this was coming. I'd known it since the vault, since the recordings, since I watched Rachel throw that key in the trash and walk out to Julian's car. But hearing it said out loud in this gray room by a federal agent with the authority to make it happen, it landed different, heavier. When? Daniel asked. Tomorrow morning. Early. Before the spa opens. Cole stood. I need you both to do something difficult tonight. Go home. Act normal. Do not contact Rachel. Do not let her know you've been here. If she calls, don't answer. If she texts, don't respond. Can you do that? Yes, I said. One more thing. He gathered the journals carefully. I'll need to keep these as evidence. Everything. The recordings. The photographs. The journals. I'll give you a receipt. I nodded. Letting go of Eleanor's journals felt like letting go of her hand. But they'd done their job. They'd reached the right person. Cole walked us back to the lobby. At the door, he stopped. Mr. Brennan, I want you to know something. In 20 years of financial crimes, I've never seen a civilian build a case like this. Your wife's documentation is better than most of what trained investigators produce. She was remarkable. I know, I said. I just wish I'd known sooner. Daniel and I walked to the truck in silence. The afternoon sun was low, casting long shadows through the moss-draped oaks along Abercorn. We got in. Neither of us started the engine. My phone buzzed. Rachel's name on the screen. Dad, I was thinking we should go through Mom's things this weekend. Just us. I'll bring lunch. Maybe we can sort through her books together. Her voice in my head. Warm. Concerned. Perfect. The same voice that had said, once she's gone, we move on the properties to a man who'd spent his life destroying families. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Didn't answer. Didn't respond. Daniel looked at me. I looked at him. Tomorrow, I said. He started the truck. We drove home through the fading light, and I thought about Eleanor. About how she'd spent 7 years preparing for this moment. Building a weapon out of patience and paper and love. And tomorrow morning, that weapon would finally fire. I'd seen men arrested before. In the Navy, in foreign ports, in situations I couldn't talk about even now. But I'd never watched my own daughter get handcuffed in the parking lot of her own business on a Tuesday morning, while the sun was still low over the rooftops of Midtown Savannah. Agent Cole had told me I didn't have to be there. That it would be easier if I stayed home. Let the professionals handle it. But I needed to see it. Needed to know it was real. Needed to stand there and watch justice arrive the way Eleanor would have wanted. Face to face. No hiding. Daniel drove. We parked across Drayton Street at 6:45, in the lot behind the coffee shop where Eleanor used to buy her morning tea. The spa was directly across the road. Magnolia Wellness and Spa. The sign was elegant. Gold letters on dark green, window boxes with white flowers. Everything about it designed to look trustworthy and warm. A mask, like everything else Rachel had built. At 6:58, 2 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. No sirens, no lights. Just quiet efficiency. Agent Cole stepped out of the first vehicle. 3 agents followed. 2 uniformed officers from Savannah PD arrived in a marked cruiser behind them. Cole looked across the street. Found me standing by the truck. He nodded once, then turned and walked toward the spa's front entrance. They didn't knock. Cole had a warrant. 1 agent used a ram on the lock, and the glass door swung open. They moved inside like water flowing through a channel. Fast, precise, practiced. 4 minutes. That's how long it took. The front door opened again. Rachel came out first, flanked by 2 agents. Her hands were behind her back. Silver handcuffs caught the early morning light. She was wearing yoga pants and a cream-colored sweater. Her hair was in a ponytail. No makeup. She looked younger without it. More like the girl she'd been before Julian. Before all of it. Then she saw me. Her face went white. Not the pale of surprise. The white of someone watching their entire world collapse in real time. "Dad?" Her voice broke across the distance between us. "Daddy, what's happening? What did you tell them?" I didn't move. Stood there beside the truck, with my hands at my sides, and watched my daughter in handcuffs, and felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt everything. I just couldn't separate any of it. Grief and anger and love and betrayal all crushed together into something too heavy to name. "Dad, please." She was crying now. Tears running down her face, voice rising. "I made mistakes, okay? I know I made mistakes. But we're family. We can fix this. You don't need the FBI. We can handle this ourselves." Cole was reading her rights. Miranda. The words floating in the morning air like something from a television show. Except, this wasn't television. This was my daughter. My firstborn. The girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to tell her about the ocean. "Daddy, please. I'm begging you." Whatever Mom wrote in those journals, she was confused. The cancer affected her mind. She didn't understand what she was seeing. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a single piece of paper, a photocopy of one journal entry. I'd asked Cole for permission to keep this one page. He'd agreed. I walked across the street. Slowly. Rachel's eyes locked onto me. Hopeful. Desperate. Thinking I was coming to save her. The way I always had. I stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to see her mascara running. Close enough to smell her perfume. The same perfume she'd worn to her mother's funeral. I unfolded the paper and read aloud. October 12, 2023. Rachel came to visit today. Asked if I've updated my will. I said no. She laughed and said, "Well, you're not getting any younger, Mom." Later, when she thought I couldn't hear, she was on the phone in my kitchen. She said, "I don't know how much longer I can wait. The old woman needs to hurry up and die, so I can finally get what's mine." Rachel's face crumbled. "That's not." Mom misunderstood. I was talking about something else. A business deal. Not her. Never her. I folded the paper. Put it back in my jacket. "Your mother was a librarian for 40 years. She documented everything with dates, context, and evidence." I looked at my daughter. At this stranger wearing my daughter's face. She didn't misunderstand anything. And neither do I. "Dad. Daddy, please. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I'll pay everything back. Every penny. Just tell them to stop. Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Rachel. It was a choice. You chose this. Every lie. Every forged signature. Every dollar you stole from those veterans. You chose Julian over your family. Over your mother." While she was dying, an agent opened the back door of the SUV. Rachel was guided inside. Still crying. Still talking. Still performing. Even now. Even in handcuffs. She was trying to find the angle. The words that would unlock the door. That would make me choose her one more time. The door closed. Through the tinted window, I could see her silhouette. Shoulders shaking. Agent Cole walked over. His expression was professional, but there was something else underneath. Something like respect. "Mr. Brennan." Julian Cross wasn't at the spa. His apartment on Victory Drive is cleared out. Landlord says he hasn't seen him in 2 days. My stomach dropped. He ran. Looks that way. He made a wire transfer yesterday afternoon from an account in Miami. We think he's heading south. Florida, maybe further. Cole straightened his jacket. "I've put out a federal alert. Interstate flight from prosecution. FBI Miami is already involved." He'll surface. Men like him always do. I watched the SUV pull away with Rachel inside. The marked cruiser followed. The other agents were still inside the spa, carrying boxes of documents, computers, filing cabinets, dismantling the machine Julian had built inside my daughter's business. Daniel appeared beside me. He'd been standing back, giving me space. His face was pale but steady. "Julian's gone," I said. "They'll find him." "I know." I looked at the spa one more time. The gold letters, the white flowers in the window boxes, all of it a lie, built on stolen money and broken trust. "It's not over yet." "No," Daniel said. "But it started." We stood there until the last FBI vehicle pulled away. Until the street was quiet again. Until Magnolia Wellness and Spa was just an empty building with a broken door and a sign that no longer meant what it said. Then we went home. And I waited for the next part. The part Eleanor's journals had prepared me for, but couldn't make easier. The courtroom. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and consequences. 3 weeks had passed since Rachel's arrest. 3 weeks of sleepless nights. 3 weeks of preparing myself for this moment, rehearsing in front of bathroom mirrors, reading Eleanor's entries until I could recite them with my eyes closed, telling myself that what I was about to do was right, necessary, what Eleanor would have wanted. Chatham County Courthouse was old the way most things in Savannah were old. High ceilings, dark wood, tall windows that let in columns of morning light. The kind of building that made you feel small, that reminded you the law was bigger than any one person's grief. I sat in the third row of the gallery. Daniel beside me. His hand found mine and squeezed once. I squeezed back. The room was fuller than I expected. Local media in the back rows, notebooks open, pens ready. Neighbors from Rachel's part of town who'd seen the FBI vehicles that morning and couldn't stay away. A few faces I recognized from Eleanor's funeral. And in the second row on the left, 4 men sat together. Harold Sims, 82. Purple heart pinned to his lapel. Thin now. Thinner than I remembered. His hands rested on a cane I'd never seen him use before. Frank Delgado, 79. Marine Corps veteran. Still broad-shouldered, still proud, but something dimmed behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. James Okafor, 77. Army. 26 years of service. He sat straight back the way only career military men do, but his jaw was tight with something that looked like barely contained rage. Robert Whitmore, 84. The oldest. Navy. Like me. His wife had died 2 years ago, thinking they were broke, because of what Rachel had taken from them. 4 men, 4 veterans. Men who served this country and came home to be robbed by a woman they trusted. By my daughter. Harold caught my eye across the aisle. He nodded once. Slow. Deliberate. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. We were on the same side now. All rise. Everyone stood. Judge Catherine Hardwick entered. Mid-60s. Silver hair. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She carried herself like a woman who'd heard every lie ever told and wasn't interested in hearing another one. We sat when she did. The state of Georgia versus Rachel Eleanor Brennan. The bailiff's voice echoed off the high ceiling. Case number 25. CR 4782. I looked at Rachel. She sat at the defense table in a navy blue suit, hair pulled back, hands folded. She looked smaller than I remembered. Younger, the expensive confidence stripped away, replaced by something I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe. Or its performance. Beside her sat Kevin Ashford. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive haircut. The kind of lawyer who charged by the syllable and smiled like it was a weapon. Rachel couldn't afford him. I didn't know who was paying. On the other side of the aisle, Andrea Shaw stood at the prosecution table. Early 40s. Dark hair. Sharp features. A stack of folders in front of her that I knew contained 7 years of Eleanor's documentation. She looked ready. Hungry, even. "Miss Shaw," Judge Hardwick said. Opening statement. Andrea stood. Walked to the center of the room. Faced the jury. 12 people who would decide my daughter's fate. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about trust, about the sacred bond between a parent and child, and about what happens when that trust is weaponized. Her voice was clear, measured, controlled. For 7 years, the defendant, Rachel Brennan, participated in a systematic scheme to defraud elderly veterans, launder money through a legitimate business, and steal nearly $6 million in real estate from her own dying mother. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Andrea waited for it to pass. The evidence will show that Rachel Brennan, in conspiracy with Julian Crossfield, a convicted elder fraud predator, identified vulnerable veterans through community events, church functions, and VA gatherings. She used her charm, her position, and her family name to gain their trust. Then she directed them to Julian Crossfield, who stole their life savings through fabricated investment schemes. Andrea clicked a remote. The courtroom screen lit up. Eleanor's face appeared. Smiling. Alive. My chest tightened so hard, I couldn't breathe for a moment. This is Eleanor Brennan. Librarian. Wife. Mother. For 35 years, she secretly built a real estate portfolio worth $5.8 million. And for 7 years, she documented her own daughter's attempts to steal it. Andrea paused. Eleanor Brennan died of cancer on March 3, 2025. She never saw justice, but she made certain justice would find her daughter anyway. Andrea clicked again. Security photographs appeared on screen. Rachel at the bank. 3 different dates. 3 different attempts. 3 times the defendant attempted to transfer ownership of her mother's properties using forged documents. 3 times she was caught by the bank's verification system. 3 times Eleanor Brennan refused to press charges because she was building something stronger than a single accusation. Andrea looked at the jury. She was building an airtight case. She clicked once more. The audio recording played through courtroom speakers. Rachel's voice. Clear. Unmistakable. She's getting worse. A few more weeks. Once she's gone, we move on the properties. The old man won't fight it. The jury shifted. Several members leaned forward. One woman in the front row closed her eyes. Andrea stopped the recording. The prosecution will present 7 years of documented evidence. Journals, recordings, security footage, financial records, victim testimony from 8 United States military veterans who lost a combined $2.1 million. She returned to her table. Eleanor Brennan couldn't be here today, but her voice will be heard. Judge Hardwick turned to the defense table. Mr. Ashford, Kevin Ashford, stood, buttoned his jacket, walked slowly to the center. He didn't look at the jury right away. He looked at Rachel. Let them see her. Small, scared, a daughter, not a monster. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice was smooth, sympathetic. The prosecution wants you to see a villain, a mastermind, a predator. He paused. I'm going to show you a victim. He clicked his own remote. Julian Crossfield's mugshot appeared on screen. Julian Andrew Crossfield. 42 years old. 2 prior federal convictions for elder fraud. A professional con man who has spent 20 years targeting women, manipulating them, using them as tools, and then disappearing when law enforcement gets close. He gestured to Rachel. 6 years ago, this man walked into Rachel Brennan's life, told her he loved her. Slowly, methodically, he turned her into an instrument of his crimes. Ashford paced slowly. The prosecution has recordings. They have journals. But they don't have Julian Crossfield in this courtroom. Because he ran. He abandoned Rachel the moment the FBI arrived. Because that is what he does. He uses women and leaves them to face consequences alone. He turned to the jury. My client made mistakes. She trusted the wrong man. But making mistakes under coercion is not the same as being a criminal mastermind. Rachel Brennan is not a predator. She is Julian Crossfield's final victim. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hardwick looked at the prosecution table. Miss Shaw, call your first witness. Andrea stood. Her eyes found mine across the room. The prosecution calls Gregory Walter Brennan to the stand. The room went still. Daniel squeezed my hand one last time. Then, let go. I stood. My legs felt unsteady. Every eye in the courtroom turned to me as I walked toward the witness stand. Past the jury. Past Rachel, who watched me approach with wet eyes and trembling lips. Past the 4 veterans who'd lost everything. The bailiff held out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I looked at Rachel. My daughter. My firstborn. I do, I said. I sat down in the witness chair. The wood was smooth, worn from decades of people telling truths they didn't want to tell. From my position, I could see everyone. The jury to my left, Andrea Shaw standing at the prosecution table. The gallery behind her, Daniel in the 3rd row, hands clasped. And directly in front of me, at the defense table, Rachel. Her eyes were fixed on me, wet, pleading. I looked away. Mr. Brennan. Andrea's voice was measured. Professional. How long were you married to Eleanor Brennan? 40 years. And when did you first learn about the $5.8 million real estate portfolio? The day of her funeral. Can you tell the jury what happened that day? I took a breath. Started at the beginning. The pastor. The envelope. The brass key. Rachel's dismissal. Her laughter. Just throw it out, Dad. Mom collected junk her whole life. Then later, watching through the kitchen window as she threw the key in the trash, walked outside to a man in a gray suit. What did you hear? Andrea asked. He asked her, Is it handled? She said, It's in the garbage. He doesn't suspect anything. The jury was leaning forward. Every face turned toward me like flowers toward the sun. I told them about 3 a.m, digging through garbage, finding the key, driving to the bank, meeting Diana Mercer, the vault, 12 properties, $5.8 million. My wife, the librarian who clipped coupons, had built an empire in secret. Why in secret? Andrea asked. Because of what I found next. I looked at the jury. Security photographs. My daughter Rachel at the bank. 3 separate times, with forged documents. Trying to steal her mother's properties. And 7 journals documenting 7 years of fraud, theft, and manipulation. Andrea picked up a journal. Mr. Brennan, I'd like you to read the entry from March 14th, 2019. I took it. Opened to the marked page. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this. Not for performance. For control. Today I discovered my daughter has been forging my signature. I found a transfer of ownership form in the recycling at the bank. My name. My properties. But not my handwriting. I cannot tell Walter yet. He would never believe his golden child is a thief. So I'm writing everything down. Silence in the courtroom. Andrea handed me another journal. The entry from April 17th, 2022. Rachel told Walter I said I feel suffocated by his schedule. I never said that. She's creating distance between us. Isolating us so we can't compare notes. It's working. He barely looks at me anymore. Andrea let the words settle. Then she handed me the final piece. The letter. Eleanor's last words to me. Mr. Brennan. This letter was found in the safe deposit box. Would you read it for the jury? I unfolded it. Eleanor's handwriting. Shaky at the end. The cancer taking her hands, but not her mind. My dearest Walter, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't explain while I was alive. I wanted to tell you every day, For 7 years. But I needed evidence. I was protecting you from the impossible choice between your daughter and the truth. My voice broke. I paused. Breathed. Continued. I couldn't make you choose. So I chose for both of us. Everything you need is in this box. 7 years of journals. Proof of everything Rachel has done. She is not working alone. A man named Julian is dangerous and using her. Please be careful. Protect Daniel. He's innocent. And please don't let Rachel get away with this. Not for my sake, but for the veterans. She'll hurt next. I folded the letter. Set it down on the railing. I love you. Even when I seemed cold, I was trying to protect you. Forgive me. Eleanor. The courtroom was silent. Someone in the gallery was crying quietly. One of the jurors wiped her eyes. Harold Sims sat perfectly still, his purple heart catching the light. No further questions, Andrea said softly. Judge Hardwick looked at the defense table. Mr. Ashford. Cross-examination. Kevin Ashford stood. Adjusted his cuffs. Walked toward me slowly. Like a man approaching something fragile. He intended to break. Mr. Brennan. His voice was gentle. Almost kind. You loved your wife very much. Yes. And her death was devastating. Yes. When someone we love dies, grief can be overwhelming. It can make us see things that aren't there. Make connections that don't exist. Would you agree? I'd agree that grief is powerful. But I disagree with where you're going. A thin smile. Your wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2023. Correct? Yes. And these journals, he gestured to the stack, were written during a period of significant physical and mental decline. Physical decline. Not mental. But you weren't there, were you, Mr. Brennan? You said yourself your wife was distant. Cold. You didn't know she was keeping journals. You didn't know about the properties. How can you be certain her mental state was unimpaired? I looked at him. Then at the jury. My wife cataloged every transaction with dates, account numbers, property addresses, and cross-referenced photographs over 7 years. She recorded phone conversations with audio timestamps. She preserved forged documents with forensic precision. I paused. I commanded a destroyer for the United States Navy. I've reviewed intelligence reports from the best analysts in the military. Eleanor's documentation is more thorough than anything I ever saw in 22 years of service. Ashford's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Enough for me to know I'd landed. Terminal cancer didn't impair her mind, Mr. Ashford. It motivated her. She knew she was running out of time. So she worked harder, faster, more precisely, because she knew she wouldn't be here to testify. So she made certain the evidence would testify for her. A long pause. The jury was watching Ashford. Waiting. No further questions, he said. I stepped down from the witness stand. My legs were unsteady, but my back was straight. Navy straight. The way Eleanor would have wanted. As I passed the defense table, Rachel reached out. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. I stopped. Daddy. Her voice was barely a whisper. Broken. Raw. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at her. At the tears on her face. At the trembling chin. At the woman who'd spent 7 years lying to everyone who loved her. Who'd wished her mother dead in a phone call she didn't know was being recorded. Was she sorry? Maybe. Was she sorry she got caught? Definitely. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. And maybe that was the saddest part. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I turned and walked back to my seat. Daniel was there. His hand on my shoulder the moment I sat down. Steady. Present. Across the aisle, Harold Sims nodded at me again. That same slow, deliberate nod. This time, it looked more like gratitude. I'd just testified against my own daughter. Read my dead wife's words to a room full of strangers. Told the truth that Eleanor had spent 7 years collecting, and I hadn't broken, hadn't wavered. hadn't chosen Rachel over the truth. For the first time in years, I felt like the man Eleanor married. 4 hours. That's how long the jury deliberated. 4 hours to waste 7 years of evidence, 40 years of marriage, and a daughter's betrayal against a dead woman's journals. I sat in the corridor outside the courtroom with Daniel. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. At 3:47, the bailiff opened the door. They're back. The courtroom filled quickly. Media in the back. The veterans in their row. Daniel and me in ours. Rachel was brought back in from a side door. She looked smaller than she had this morning. The navy suit wrinkled now. Her eyes puffy and red. All rise. Judge Hardwick entered. We stood. Saturday. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood. A man in his 60s. Silver hair. Reading glasses. We have, Your Honor, on the charge of money laundering, how do you find? Guilty. Rachel's shoulders jerked. Ashford put a hand on her arm. On the charge of elder financial abuse, count 1. How do you find? Guilty. Count 2? Guilty. Count 3? Guilty. The foreperson read through every charge. Money laundering. Elder financial abuse, 3 counts. Wire fraud, identity theft. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Forgery. Attempted theft of real property. 10 counts total. Every single one. Guilty. By the time he finished, Rachel was sobbing. Silent. Shaking sobs that made her whole body tremble. Ashford sat beside her. Stone-faced. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just a hollow space where something used to be. Thank you, Judge Hardwick said to the jury. Before sentencing, the court will hear victim impact statements. She looked at the gallery. Mr. Sims, Harold Sims stood. Slowly. Using his cane, he walked to the front of the courtroom with careful, deliberate steps. A man who'd survived 2 tours in Vietnam now needed a cane to cross 30 feet of floor. He turned to face Rachel. I served this country for 30 years. His voice was quiet but steady. The voice of a man who'd decided every word mattered. I came home. Worked 20 more years at the shipyard. Saved everything I could for retirement. $40,000. That's what I had. Not a fortune. But it was mine. He looked directly at Rachel. You came to my church. Sat next to me. At a Veterans Day lunch. Told me about an investment that could help me leave something for my grandchildren. You smiled at me like I was your own grandfather. His voice cracked. I trusted you, and you stole every penny I had. I couldn't afford my blood pressure medication for 4 months. I lost my apartment. I've been living in a VA shelter since October. He gripped his cane with both hands. I'm 82 years old. I don't have time to start over. What you took from me, I'll never get back. Harold sat down. Frank Delgado stood next. Marine Corps. 22 years. He was broad, his voice harder than Harold's. Angrier. I lost $35,000. Money I earned crawling through jungles and standing post in places you've never heard of. You told me it was going to help build housing for veterans. He shook his head. There was no housing. There was never any housing. Just you and that man. Taking from people who served so you could buy expensive clothes and drive expensive cars. He sat. Robert Whitmore stood last. The oldest. 84. Navy. His voice shook, but not from weakness. My wife Margaret died 2 years ago. He looked at Rachel. She died thinking we were broke. Thinking I'd failed her, because by the time I realized you'd taken our $45,000, I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't look her in the eye and say I'd been fooled by a girl half my age. Tears rolled down his face. Margaret died, ashamed of me, for something that was your fault. You didn't just steal my money. You stole my wife's peace, and I can never give that back to her. He sat down. The courtroom was silent, except for Rachel's crying. Judge Hardwick turned to the defense table. Miss Brennan, do you have anything to say before sentencing? Rachel stood, shaking, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I'm sorry. Her voice was barely audible. I'm sorry for everything. I let someone control me. I hurt people who trusted me. I hurt my family. If I could take it back. She broke down. Couldn't finish. Ashford helped her sit. Judge Hardwick removed her reading glasses, folded them on the bench, looked at Rachel with an expression that held no sympathy. Miss Brennan, I've reviewed 7 years of your mother's documentation. I've heard testimony from 4 veterans you defrauded. I've listened to recordings of you discussing your mother's death as a business opportunity. Her voice was ice. You showed no remorse until you were caught. You targeted men who served this nation. You conspired to steal from your own dying mother. And you manipulated your family for years to conceal your crimes. She paused. Let the silence weigh. On counts 1 through 3, elder financial abuse, I sentence you to 18 months on each count, to run consecutively. On counts 4 through 10, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, I sentence you to 12 months on each, concurrent with each other, but consecutive to counts 1 through 3. Total sentence, 4 years in federal custody. Rachel's legs gave out. Ashford steadied her. Additionally, the judge continued, you will pay full restitution in the amount of $2.1 million to the victims. You will pay $5.8 million in damages to your father as rightful owner of the properties you attempted to steal. Upon release, you will serve 5 years of supervised probation. The gavel came down. Final. Absolute. 2 bailiffs approached Rachel, helped her stand. Her face was destroyed. Mascara, tears, something broken behind her eyes that might have been real, or might have been one last performance. They led her toward the side door. She looked back at me. One last time. I hope you're happy, Dad. I looked at my daughter, at the woman she'd become, at the wreckage of everything our family used to be. I'm not happy, I said. But your mother finally has peace. The door closed behind her. Gone. Daniel's hand found my shoulder. Across the aisle, Harold Sims was shaking Frank Delgado's hand. Robert Whitmore was wiping his eyes. James Okafor sat perfectly still, staring at the closed door like he was making sure it stayed shut. Agent Cole appeared beside me. He'd been in the back of the courtroom the entire time. I hadn't noticed him. Mr. Brennan. His voice was low. Julian Crossfield. We found him. Miami Beach. He's being extradited tonight. I looked at Cole. At Daniel. At the 4 veterans who just watched my daughter get convicted. Good, I said. It's about time. They found him in a beachfront condo in Miami. Tanned, relaxed. Already working a new angle. A widow in Coral Gables, with a military pension and a lonely daughter who reminded her of the one she'd lost. Same pattern. Same playbook. Different state. 2 months after Rachel's conviction, Julian Andrew Crossfield was brought into the federal courthouse in Savannah, wearing an orange jumpsuit and ankle chains. His hair was shorter than I remembered from the driveway. His skin was dark from 2 months of Florida sun, but his eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. The eyes of a man who'd spent 20 years looking at people and seeing only what he could take from them. Daniel and I sat in the gallery. Same courthouse. Different courtroom. Bigger this time. Federal jurisdiction meant higher ceilings, more security, more media. The case had drawn national attention. CNN rend un segment. The New York Times wrote about Eleanor's journals. A retired librarian who built a $6 million case against a professional con man. People were fascinated by her, by what she'd done alone, in silence. For 7 years, Julian was brought to the defense table. A public defender sat beside him. Young, overworked, clearly aware this was unwinnable. Julian had burned through whatever money he'd hidden. The beachfront condo was rented. His accounts were frozen. The charm that had carried him through 20 years of fraud couldn't buy a decent lawyer. The charges were read. 12 federal counts. Wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen funds, money laundering, conspiracy to commit elder fraud, each one carrying up to 20 years, across 4 states: Florida, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina. The prosecution's case took 6 days. They brought in victims from every state. Elderly parents who'd lost their savings. Sons and daughters who'd discovered too late what had been taken. Families ripped apart by the same pattern Julian had used on us. A retired teacher from Jacksonville who lost $90,000 through a woman Julian had been dating. That woman was now serving 5 years in a Florida prison. Julian had disappeared the week before her arrest. A veteran's widow in Austin who lost her husband's entire pension through a fake charity. The woman Julian used there got 3 years. Julian had been in Savannah by the time she was sentenced. 3 women, 3 states, 3 prison sentences. And Julian had walked away from every single one. Used them, discarded them, moved on to the next. The defense tried. Argued Julian was a product of the foster system, abandoned at birth. No education, no support, just survival instincts that went wrong. His public defender painted a picture of a broken child who became a broken man, asked for leniency, asked the jury to see a human being. Not a monster. The jury didn't buy it. On the 8th day they returned. Guilty. On all 12 counts. Unanimous. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. I was there for that, too. Daniel beside me. Agent Cole in the back row. Harold Sims in the second row. Purple heart on his lapel. Cane between his knees. Judge Margaret Calloway presided. 60s. Silver-haired. Glasses that she peered over like a librarian. Eleanor would have liked her. Mr. Crossfield. Her voice filled the courtroom like a bell. You have spent the better part of 2 decades preying on families. You targeted trust. You weaponized love. You found women who wanted to believe in you and turned them into instruments of theft and destruction. Julian stood at the defense table. His expression was blank. The charm stripped away. Nothing left underneath but emptiness. You left a trail of broken families and empty bank accounts across 4 states, Judge Calloway continued. 8 veterans in Georgia alone lost a combined $2.1 million. Men who served this country. Men who trusted the people you corrupted. She removed her glasses, set them on the bench. 3 women are currently serving prison sentences for crimes you orchestrated. 1 woman in Texas took her own life 18 months into her sentence because she couldn't live with what she'd done under your influence. The judge's voice hardened. You are not a victim of circumstance, Mr. Crossfield. You are a predator. And this court will not show you the mercy you never showed your victims. She paused. The courtroom held its breath. I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. Restitution is set at $4.2 million, to be divided among all identified victims across all 4 jurisdictions. The gavel fell. 20 years. Julian Crossfield would be 62 years old before he saw daylight again. As the marshals moved to take him away, Julian turned, looked across the courtroom. Found me. Our eyes met, for the first time, since the driveway. Since is it handled? Since the old man won't fight it. He smiled. Not the charming smile he'd used on Rachel and the others. Something else. Something that looked almost like admiration. Your wife, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. She was the only one who ever saw through me. Every other family, I was gone, before they knew what happened. But she watched me for 7 years, documented everything, built a case from nothing. The marshals gripped his arms, started pulling him toward the door. 40 years as a librarian, Julian called back. And she was better than every detective, every agent, every prosecutor who ever came after me. I stood. Not to respond to his admiration, but because Eleanor deserved to hear the truth spoken back to the man who tried to destroy her family. That's because she loved the people you destroyed, I said. And love is more patient than greed will ever be. Julian's smile faded. The marshals pulled him through the door. It closed. And Julian Andrew Crossfield was gone. Daniel stood beside me. The courtroom was emptying. Harold Sims caught my eye and nodded. That same slow nod. But this time, there was something new in it. Completion. We walked out into the afternoon sun. Savannah was doing what Savannah does. Tourists on the sidewalks, horse carriages on the squares, Spanish moss, swaying like it had for 300 years. Like none of this had happened. It's really over. Daniel said quietly, "Yeah." I looked at the courthouse doors closing behind us. Rachel in prison. Julian in prison. Eleanor's evidence had brought them both down. It's really over. Daniel put his hand on my shoulder. What now? I thought about Eleanor. About the $5.8 million she'd built over 35 years. About the veterans who'd lost everything. About Harold Sims in his VA shelter and Robert Whitmore's wife dying ashamed. Something that matters, I said. Something Mom would be proud of. Daniel nodded. We walked to the truck together, leaving the courthouse behind us. The ending of one thing, the beginning of another. The office was small. 3 rooms on the second floor of an old building on Broughton Street. Above the bookshop Eleanor used to visit every Saturday morning. She'd spend an hour browsing the shelves, running her fingers along spines the way other people touch piano keys. Careful. Reverent. Like every book, held a secret worth finding. Now her name was on the door. The Eleanor Brennan Foundation for Veteran Financial Protection. Gold letters on frosted glass. Daniel had designed the logo himself. An oak tree with roots that looked like open hands. Strength and shelter. That's what he said it meant. 12 months after Julian's sentencing, we opened the doors. Not a grand event. No politicians. No cameras from CNN, though they'd asked. Just the people who mattered. Daniel and his wife Sarah, 4 months pregnant. Agent Cole, in a rare civilian suit. Diana Mercer from the bank. Pastor James, who blessed the office with a prayer that made everyone cry. And the veterans. Harold Sims, Frank Delgado, James Okafor, Robert Whitmore. 4 men who'd lost everything and chose to turn their pain into something that could protect others. I stood at the front of the room, looking at faces that had become family over the past year. People bound together, not by blood, but by what they'd survived. I'm not good at speeches, I said. Eleanor was the reader in this family. She would have quoted someone wise and made it sound effortless. I cleared my throat. But here's what I know. My wife saved $5.8 million over 35 years. She did it quietly, patiently, without anyone knowing. And when she discovered that money was being targeted by a predator, she didn't run. She didn't hide. She spent 7 years building a case. Alone. In silence. While cancer was taking her body apart, the room was quiet. Harold leaned forward on his cane. Eleanor didn't live to see justice, but she made certain justice would come. And now, her money, the money she built her entire life, is going to protect the people she loved most. Veterans, people who served, people who deserve better than to be preyed upon by men like Julian Crossfield. I looked at the framed photo on the wall behind me. Eleanor, at the Savannah Book Festival, 5 years ago. Smiling. A stack of novels in her arms. Happy. This foundation exists because my wife refused to let cruelty win. And because 4 men in this room chose to turn their worst experience into a shield for others. I nodded to Harold, Frank, James, Robert. Thank you. For your service. For your courage. And for being here. Harold stood. Slowly. Using his cane. But standing straight. Army straight. "Eleanor Brennan saved my life," he said. His voice was stronger than it had been in the courtroom. Months of proper meals, medication, stability. The foundation had helped him find an apartment, recovered $12,000 of his $40,000 through the restitution process. Not everything, but enough to start again. I was living in a shelter. Couldn't afford my medicine. Thought about ending it more than once. He looked at me. "Your wife paid for my first month's rent." Anonymously, before she even started the foundation. Before the trial. She just did it. Because that's who she was. I hadn't known that. Another secret Eleanor had kept. Another quiet act of love she'd never mentioned. "Now I'm here," Harold continued. 83 years old, and I'm volunteering 3 days a week. Teaching other veterans how to spot scams, how to protect their retirement, how to ask the right questions before they hand over their money. He tapped his cane on the floor. "I can't get back what I lost, but I can make sure the next Harold Sims doesn't lose it in the first place." The room applauded. Frank Delgado whistled. James Okafor smiled for the first time I'd ever seen. After the speeches, after the coffee and the handshakes and the tours of our small office, Daniel pulled me aside. We stood by the window overlooking Broughton Street. Below us, people walked past the bookshop. Ordinary life. The kind Eleanor had lived on the surface while building an empire underneath. "I want to show you something." Daniel opened his laptop. Our first 12 months. Before the official opening, he turned the screen toward me. The Eleanor Brennan Foundation. 12-month impact report. 214 veterans assisted through financial counseling, legal referral, or direct intervention. 18 cases referred to law enforcement. 9 prosecutions initiated. $1.5 million recovered for victims across 3 states. 6 states had contacted us about replicating our model. California, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Oregon, and North Carolina. 214 people, I said quietly. 214 people who didn't lose everything. Daniel closed the laptop. Mom's money is doing exactly what she would have wanted. I looked at Eleanor's photo on the wall again. The stack of books in her arms. The smile. She'd spent her life surrounded by other people's stories. Now, her own story was saving lives. "There's something else," Daniel said. His voice changed. Lighter. Almost nervous. I looked at him. Sarah had her ultrasound yesterday. He was trying not to smile. Failing. "It's a girl, Dad." My chest expanded. Something warm and huge and almost painful. "We want to name her Eleanor." I couldn't speak. Just nodded. Pulled my son into a hug. And held on. 30 years of distance between us. And now this. A granddaughter. Eleanor's name carried forward into a life that would never know her grandmother, but would grow up surrounded by her legacy. "Eleanor Rose Brennan," Daniel said into my shoulder. Sarah picked Rose. "For new beginnings." I held him tighter. Outside the window, Savannah moved on. Spanish moss swayed. Tourists took photographs. The bookshop below us sold stories to strangers. And upstairs, in 3 small rooms with gold letters on the door, my wife's life's work was becoming something that would outlast all of us. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone at my desk. The office was quiet, just the tick of the clock and the faint sound of traffic below. Eleanor's photo watched me from the wall. "We did it," I whispered. "Your money is saving the people you loved, and your granddaughter is going to carry your name." The photo didn't answer, but I could have sworn she was smiling wider than before. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Federal prison return address. Tallahassee, Florida. Rachel's handwriting on the envelope. Neat. Careful. The same handwriting she'd had since she was 16, when Eleanor taught her that penmanship mattered, that the way you wrote something said as much as what you wrote. I set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for an hour. Made coffee, drank it, made more, stared some more. Part of me wanted to throw it away the same way she'd thrown away that brass key. Let it rot in the garbage under paper towels and coffee grounds. But I didn't. Because Eleanor wouldn't have. I opened it. Dear Dad, I know you probably won't read this. And if you do, I know you won't write back. I understand. I don't deserve a response. But I need to say these things, even if they disappear into silence. Her handwriting was different inside. Less controlled. Shakier. Like the performance had finally dropped, and what was left was just a woman in a cell, trying to find words for something words can't fix. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm not going to blame Julian. He was part of it, yes. But I chose. Every time. Every lie I told you. Every dollar I took. Every time I looked Mom in the eye and pretended I wasn't stealing from her. I chose that. Me. Not Julian. Me. I set the letter down. Picked it up again. I'm taking classes. Accounting. Like Mom. I don't know why. Maybe because it's the closest I can get to understanding who she really was. What she built. What I tried to destroy. My counselor says I have narcissistic personality patterns, that I learned to manipulate instead of connect, that I used people instead of loving them. It sounds clinical, but it's true. I think about Mom every day, about those journals. The prosecution gave me copies during the trial. I've read them all, every entry, including the ones where she wrote about wanting to save me, about hoping I'd stop on my own, about believing there was still something good in me worth protecting. She was wrong about that, but I want her to be right. Someday. I don't know if I can be the person she hoped I could be, but I'm trying. For the first time in my life, I'm actually trying. I don't expect you to visit. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. All of it. What I did. What it cost. Who I hurt. I love you, Dad. I know that doesn't mean much coming from me, but it's the only true thing I have left. Rachel. I folded the letter. Put it in the drawer of my desk. Didn't throw it away. Didn't answer it. Somewhere between those two choices was where I lived now. Not ready to forgive. Not willing to close the door completely. Maybe someday. But not today. The next morning I drove to Bonaventure Cemetery. It was our Sunday ritual now. Every week since the trial. Me and the live oaks and the Spanish moss and Eleanor's headstone on the hill overlooking the river. The cemetery was quiet. Always was. That's what I liked about it. Savannah's dead. Rested under canopies of oak and azalea. Surrounded by more peace than most of them had known in life. Eleanor's plot was near the eastern edge. Morning sun. She'd always been an early riser. The headstone was simple. Gray granite. Her name and dates. And underneath, the inscription Daniel and I had chosen together. Eleanor Marie Brennan. 1963 to 2025. She chose truth over comfort. I knelt down. Set white lilies against the stone. Her favorite. Then I sat on the bench, across from her grave, and talked the way I always did. Like she could hear me. Like the space between life and death was just another distance she'd learned to cross in silence. Hi, Eleanor. It's Sunday again. The breeze moved through the moss above me. Soft. Listening. The foundation hit 214 people this year. Can you believe that? 214 veterans who didn't lose everything because of what you built. We recovered $1.5 million. 6 states are copying our model. I smiled. You're helping people all over the country. From a 3-room office, above your favorite bookshop, I pulled a blade of grass from the earth beside the headstone, twisted it between my fingers. Rachel wrote me a letter. From prison. She says she's sorry. She says she's changing. I paused. I don't know if I believe her yet, but I didn't throw the letter away. That counts for something, I think. A cardinal landed on the headstone. Red against gray. Stayed for a moment. Flew away. Daniel's baby is due next week. A girl. They're naming her Eleanor Rose. My voice cracked. You're going to be a grandmother, sweetheart. And she's going to know your name. She's going to grow up in a world that's a little bit safer because of what you did. I wiped my eyes. Placed my hand flat on the cool granite. Thank you. For the key. For the journals. For loving me enough to carry this alone, even when it meant pushing me away. Even when it meant spending your last years cold and distant and misunderstood. I swallowed hard. I understand now. Everything you did out of love. The hardest, bravest kind of love there is. I stood. Looked at her name one more time. Rest now, Eleanor. Julian's gone for 20 years. Rachel's paying for what she did. Daniel and I are healing. And your legacy is saving lives. Every single day. I walked back down the hill toward the parking lot. The sun was higher now. Warm on my back. Savannah. Doing what it always does. Being beautiful. Even when the world is broken. 3 days later, Daniel called at 2 a.m. Dad. It's time. We're at Memorial. I drove to the hospital in the dark. Parked crooked. Ran through the lobby like a man half my age. Found Daniel in the hallway outside the delivery room. His face was white and radiant at the same time. Terror and joy mixed together the way only new fatherhood can produce. Is she okay? Is Sarah okay? They're both perfect. He was crying. Smiling. Both. Dad. Come see her. He led me into the room. Sarah was in the bed, exhausted and glowing. And in her arms, wrapped in a white blanket with a pink stripe, was the smallest human being I'd ever seen. Eleanor Rose Brennan. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. Born at 1:47 in the morning. Dark hair. Small fists curled against her chest. Eyes closed. Peaceful. You want to hold her? Sarah asked. I took my granddaughter carefully. Cradled her against my chest, the way I'd held Rachel 38 years ago. The way I'd held Daniel 30 years ago. The same weight. The same warmth. The same terrifying, overwhelming love. But this time, I knew something I hadn't known then. I knew that love wasn't enough by itself. That you had to pair it with truth. With vigilance. With the courage to see things clearly, even when clarity hurt. Hi, Eleanor. I whispered. I'm your grandfather. And I'm going to tell you about the woman you're named after. The bravest woman I ever knew. She stirred. Made a small sound. Then settled against my chest and slept. Daniel put his arm around me. Mom would have loved this. She does, I said. She does. 18 months after I found that brass key in the trash, I finally understood what Eleanor had been trying to tell me all along. The truth doesn't just set you free. It demands something from you first. It demands that you look at what you don't want to see. That you admit what you don't want to admit. That you choose what's right over what's comfortable, over what's easy, over what lets you keep sleeping at night without asking the hard questions. Eleanor chose truth. Every single day for 7 years, she chose it. And it cost her everything. Her marriage, at least on the surface. Her peace. Her final years, spent cold and distant from the man she loved because she couldn't risk letting him close enough to see what was breaking her apart. But in the end, her truth saved us all. I'm sitting on a bench in Forsyth Park on a Sunday afternoon. Late spring. The azaleas are blooming. Daniel is beside me, pushing a stroller back and forth with one hand. Inside that stroller, wrapped in a yellow blanket with her small fists curled against her chest, is Eleanor Rose Brennan, 4 months old. She has her grandmother's chin. Her grandmother's stubborn little furrow between her eyebrows when she's sleeping. And I'd like to believe she has her grandmother's strength somewhere in those tiny bones. The kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. That works in silence. that builds in the dark. Looking back at this story, at everything that happened since that funeral in First Baptist Church, I see a man who was blind when he should have been vigilant. I trusted too easily. I dismissed warnings. I chose comfort over truth. I handed my golden child money and praise and the benefit of every doubt while my son stood in the shadows trying to tell me something was wrong. While my wife carried a war alone because she knew I wouldn't believe her. Don't be like me. Listen when your gut whispers something's wrong. Pay attention when one child warns you about another. Watch the patterns, not just the tears. Because manipulators don't announce themselves. They disguise themselves as the people you love most. They wear your daughter's face. They use your daughter's voice. They cry your daughter's tears. And if you're not careful, you'll hand them everything before you realize the person standing in front of you isn't who they used to be. This isn't a revenge story. Some might see it that way. A father bringing down his own daughter. A dead wife reaching from the grave to destroy the child who betrayed her. But that's not what this is. This is a story about a woman who loved her family so much, she spent 7 years in silence building a shield to protect them, who endured loneliness and misunderstanding and cancer eating her body apart, all because she believed that truth, eventually, would win. And it did. God gives us signs. I believe that now more than I believed it before. Eleanor's coldness wasn't rejection, it was protection. God was speaking through her silence, saying something is wrong here. Pay attention. Daniel's fear at that dinner table. His shaking hands on the porch the night of the funeral. That was a sign too. God speaking through my quiet son, saying, listen to this one. He's telling you the truth. Even Rachel's perfect facade. The too smooth smiles. The tears that came too easily and dried too fast. Those were signs. God showing me that perfection is a mask. And what hides behind a mask is rarely what you hope. I ignored every single one. For years. But God is patient. More patient than my blindness. More patient than Rachel's lies. More patient than Julian's greed. And when Eleanor left that brass key in a sealed envelope with Pastor James, that was God giving me one final chance to see clearly, to choose truth, to finish what my wife started. I took that chance. And it changed everything. The Eleanor Brennan Foundation has now helped over 300 veterans across 9 states. We've recovered $2.3 million in stolen funds. We've assisted in 14 criminal prosecutions. Harold Sims volunteers 3 days a week. Frank Delgado runs our outreach program at VA centers. Robert Whitmore speaks at churches and community centers, telling his story so others don't repeat it. James Okafor sits on our board of advisors. 4 men who were victims became protectors. That's what healing looks like, when you refuse to let pain be the end of your story. Rachel has 2.5 years left on her sentence. She writes me every month. I've read every letter. Haven't answered any of them. But I haven't thrown them away either. Daniel asks me sometimes if I'll ever visit her, if I'll ever forgive her. I don't know. Forgiveness isn't something you can force. It comes when it comes, or it doesn't. But I know Eleanor would want me to leave that door open. Not for Rachel's sake, for mine. Because carrying anger is its own kind of prison, and I've seen enough prisons for one lifetime. What I know for certain is this. Eleanor's money could have made Rachel rich, could have funded a lifestyle of luxury and lies for decades. Instead, it's making the world safer. It's protecting men who serve this country. It's giving families a shield against the predators who hide in plain sight. That's not revenge. That's legacy. And legacy is what love looks like when it refuses to let cruelty win. If this story reached something in you, if you saw yourself in my mistakes or in Eleanor's courage or in Daniel's patience, then it meant something. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be ignoring the signs. Someone who might be choosing comfort over truth. Someone who might be handing their trust to the wrong person because that person's smile is bright and their tears are convincing. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And tell me this. If you found a brass key in the trash at 3 in the morning, would you have the courage to find out what it opened? I hope you would. Eleanor did. And it saved us all. One last thing. If you're a veteran, or you love a veteran, and something in your financial life doesn't feel right, trust that feeling. Don't ignore it. Don't let anyone tell you you're being paranoid. Reach out. Ask questions. Protect yourself. Because the people who prey on trust are counting on your silence. Don't give them that. Eleanor didn't. And neither will I. Not anymore. Not ever again. Quick note. This narrative includes dramatized elements, crafted for awareness and education. If this style resonates with you, there's more where this came from. Subscribe, so you don't miss the next one. And remember, sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone you love is let them get away with destroying others. The kindest thing is the truth. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts.